The brain's main job is to keep us safe. But if that's so, then why is the safety feature of being in a state of fight or flight? We are going to be looking at that today. Hi, my name is Lisa Ann de Garcia, and I am an integrative developmental and educational specialist, and my focus is helping you to understand the brain and related issues so that you can reverse the physical, mental, and emotional challenges that you or your child is experiencing. In today's video, I'm going to uncover the mechanisms behind fight or flight response, why it can be useful, and ways to not get stuck in it. But first, hit the subscribe button below so you will be the first to know when I post a new piece of content. And I am going to be posting these every single Monday, so you can expect them on Monday morning. Okay, so the fight or flight response is a complex physiological reaction to a perceived threat or stressor. It's triggered by a release of hormones. It prepares the body to either confront danger, which is to fight, or to escape from it, which is flight. And you may recognize some of these symptoms that are associated with the flight or fight response. So these are going to be very physiological symptoms. Increased heart rate, rapid breathing, pale and flushed skin, dilated pupils, muscle tension, sweating, increased blood pressure, tunnel vision, heightened awareness, feelings of anxiety and fear, that's a biggie, impaired cognitive function, even brain fog, severe sensitivity to light or sound. In fact, when we're in the state of fight or flight, it cuts the blood flow to the frontal cortex, which is why we have a lot of the cognitive, can't think rationally type symptoms, and we're reacting more from the brainstem. So this response is meant to help out in catastrophic events, such as being chased by a bear, after which the symptoms should be able to return to normal. So we should be able to be balanced between fight or flight or rest and digest. However, today, many people seem to be stuck in this state, which causes many problems such as debilitating pain, uncontrollable rage, organ trouble, sleep disorders, other sleep issues, anxiety, obesity, hypersensitivities, diabetes, high blood pressure. Okay, so the list goes on and on. We can't be stuck in this state. Being in a constant state of fight or flight can also lead to chronic muscle tensions, especially in the neck, the back, and the back of the legs. And the combination of these tensions can be what's behind toe walking in children. So if you have a child who is a toe walker, I would look at stress and anxiety as being kind of behind all that. When the body is more focused on the environment, it can't be focused on close-up details. So therefore, it makes schoolwork and learning really hard. So we're either focused on the environment, which is where's that bear, or on the details. So we can't be focused on both. So it's also difficult to regulate emotions, and every time we are triggered by something, the connectivity is lost to the frontal part of the brain, which I mentioned, that rational cortex, and then causing us to react. And that reacting area in the brainstem is our survival area. You know, that's the area of the brain that regulates our heartbeat and all our survival mechanisms. The autonomic nervous system is in charge of the things that are automatic for the body, such as breathing and heartbeat that I just mentioned. Fortunately, we don't have to remember to do such tasks all day long, because if we did, we would all be dead. Okay, so I can't even remember one thing, 1 minute to the next sometimes. So luckily, we don't have to do that. There are two main branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So the fight or flight is that sympathetic branch. The parasympathetic, on the contrary, is the rest and digest. And homeostasis would be the ease of going back and forth between the two. So that homeostasis just means basically really good balance. The vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, helps us be in a parasympathetic state. When we are stuck in a sympathetic fight or flight state, the vagus nerve is not functioning as it should. So the vagus nerve is the wandering nerve. It connects to all of our internal organs, helps us with that breathing and the digestion and all of that. If that's not doesn't have good tone and it is not functioning properly, then we can get stuck in that fight or flight state. In the womb, so when the baby is in the womb, the first reflex to develop is the freeze response. In functional medicine, it's known as a cell danger response. In other circles, it's known as a fear paralysis reflex, essentially what's happening is that all the cell walls close up in the presence of toxins as a way to prevent them from entering and exiting the cell. So we have all the cells, the cell walls close up, and the toxins can't get in, and it's just a survival mechanism when it's around the toxins that the mother is ingesting, or her own cortisol. So when she's under stress, cortisol is a toxin. When she's eating something that has a toxin, this is a withdrawal response, and if it's still active at birth, it can be a contributing factor to SIDS or have a psychological consequence such as severe phobias. Towards the end of the gestation period, so it comes on really, really early in the gestation period, but towards the end, before birth, the sympathetic system starts to develop, causing the integration of this freeze response. And after birth is when the parasympathetic tone should develop. So we have like the freeze. So we often hear of that fight or flight and freeze. So the freeze develops first, then the sympathetic system kicks in and kind of dampens that. Then the parasympathetic system after birth kicks in and should dampen or balance with the sympathetic tone. And in babies, you'll see that sympathetic response as the moral reflex. You'll recognize it as their startle response. So if you close the door, their arms fly out, and then they come in, and then you wait for it, you count 1, 2, and then all of a sudden they cry and scream. And that should integrate just a few months after birth into a mature startle. So if you know of anyone who jumps out of their skin when you sneak up on them, that would be an unintegrated moral reflex. We all have a startle reflex that is normal for our protection. So if we go into our house and there's an intruder in our house, we should get startled by that, but not for every little thing. And you'll know what I mean if you know somebody who just literally jumps out of their skin for any little thing. The amygdala is the part of the brain. It's an almond-shaped structure deep inside the brain, and it's really small, but it's responsible for all the havoc experienced during the fight or flight or the freeze response. The amygdala is part of a larger network in your brain called the limbic system, which is the emotional center, and these parts of your brain automatically detect danger. The amygdala processes things that you see or hear and uses that input to learn what's dangerous. So if you encounter something similar in the future, then the amygdala will cause you to feel fear or similar emotions that you felt like that first time. The amygdala modulates the hypothalamus. So it's the hypothalamus is another area of the brain, and its job is to keep that homeostasis or balance in our bodies. So it's, things like, temperature. So when my youngest was born, he was born early, so he wasn't holding his temperature, and that's a hypothalamus thing. And it's also in constant communication with other brain areas such as the cortex, brainstem, and hippocampus, which is the memory center. So the amygdala is actually right kind of at the end of the hippocampus, and that's why the memory is so closely related to stress, by the way. So during a stressful experience, there is possible dysfunction in the medial prefrontal cortex amygdala circuit. Okay, and that essentially shuts off the rational thinking during stress, leads someone to become reactive rather than responsive, which we mentioned earlier. In order to help rebalance the system, once you're in fight or flight or when experiencing sympathetic dominance, it's helpful to engage in down-regulating activities, which is what I'm going to show you in just a second. So the amygdala detects a variety of physical and emotional stressors. It decides if a stress signal is even necessary, and if so, the amygdala sends signals to stimulate the hypothalamus, which releases a hormone called CRH, which in turn stimulates the pituitary gland to release ACTH, which is another hormone that stimulates the adrenals to release cortisol. So we have like the hypothalamus to the pituitary to the adrenals, and then the cortisol is released. When enough cortisol is sensed, the stress is reduced or removed, It will cut back on the release of the stress hormones, and this is known as the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So if you're familiar with things like, you might have heard of adrenal fatigue or whatever, but this is the axis and this is the loop. So this is actually really important. When under chronic stress, the hypothalamus and the pituitary can lose sensitivity to the cortisol and not recognize the cortisol is high, and it might keep producing the CRH and the ACTH, thus creating hypothalamus pituitary axis dysfunction and burn out the adrenals, because if it keeps sending those hormone signals to the adrenals are going to keep pumping out the cortisol, and that's when you get that adrenal fatigue or burnout, or however you want to describe it. They kind of change the terms every once in a while. Constant stress, constant stress creates an elevated cortisol to DHEA ratio. So the DHEA and the cortisol should be in a certain ratio, and when it's off, it leads to energy production issues, body chemistry issues, problems with the immune system, and generally causing what functional diagnostic nutrition they like to call, or they've coined the term, metabolic chaos. So once this cortisol and DHEA ratio is off, you have too much cortisol, and then it just causes all sorts of havoc in the body. So being a metabolic chaos, it puts a person in a catabolic state, and then it cascades down through the body, causing potential laundry list of symptoms that may seem like they have nothing to do with each other. Okay, but so just imagine like a pool table, and you have all your balls set up, and you have this the white ball over here, and everything is all lined up and all balanced, and you just take this one ball and you hit it, and it all scatters, and all of a sudden you have all these issues, and one ball could be the immune system, one ball can be your enzyme production or whatever. Like, they could all be different things, and so they don't seem related to the original stressor, but they are all downstream from it. Environmental toxins are one of the main stressors of the body, and though there are others, such as our own imbalanced gut bacteria, parasites, and other pathogens, and to see a list of all these toxins, be sure to download my ebook using the link that I'm going to provide in the description below. So another thing that you can do in order to downregulate the amygdala is focused breathing and focused activities. And for another surprising tip, it's also my ebook. So again, make sure you read that. When focusing, we are engaging the prefrontal cortex, and that seems to have an inhibitory effect on the amygdala. In fact, they seem to have an inverse relationship one to the other. So when one is more active, the other is not. They aren't both active at the same time. So if the amygdala is too active, the way to downregulate it is to activate that frontal cortex. Focused breathing will not only have an effect on the amygdala, but because of the increased oxygen and increased CO2 tolerance, it will provide general health benefits as well. There are many breathing techniques, including breathing in for the count of 4, holding the count of 6, and breathing out the count of 8, or exhaling double the amount of inhale. So slow inhaling, and then exhale at least twice as long as your inhale. Other focused cognitive type activities also have effect, since it's stimulating that prefrontal cortex. So you can engage in working memory tasks where you try to manipulate pieces of information in your mind. For example, trying to recite your phone number backwards. Anything that's really making you have to think and concentrate will help downregulate that amygdala. So in this week's tips and tricks, which I post on Wednesdays, it's in a different playlist. I will give you a completely different way for downregulating the amygdala that can be easily used with children having a meltdown. So be sure to look out for that this Wednesday. So my tips and tricks is just a video that's really short, like just 1 to 3 minutes long, and something that you can just use right away, to, if it applies to you. So please hit subscribe if you found this video helpful. And again, don't forget to get a copy of my ebook, In a Constant State of Fight or Flight, Getting to the Bottom of Sympathetic Dominance, by clicking the link below. And I will see you in the next video next Monday. Bye-bye.